Hey, it's Joey for Digital DJ Tips, and welcome to another episode of Your Feedback. In today's video, the question is, do pro DJs use sync when recording their mixes? Now, before I move on to your views, I'm going to share my answer first. The answer is yes and no. Yes, some pro DJs use sync when they want to create a perfect mix or a mix show quickly and they want to minimize errors. And no, some DJs prefer not to use sync when they want to retain a live beat-matched feel to their mixes. Now, believe it or not, there is a small sonic difference between the sound of a manually beat-matched mix as well as a perfectly synced one. Those tiny little discrepancies between the tempos of two tracks create for a liver, more human feel. And personally, that is what I prefer whenever I create a live mix, whether I'm recording it for a podcast or for a mix show, or if I'm doing like a Facebook live stream or something on Chew.tv. Now, when I want to create something for a mix show, and I want to do it in a hurry, what I do is I take a couple of tracks and then I throw them into Ableton Live and then I create my mix show there. Of course, what happens there is that I tend to sync the tracks just so it's a lot quicker. Although if I do have time to create a nice mix, I always prefer manually beat matching the tracks in my mix. Right, so that's my answer. Now let's head on over to yours. Our first answer comes from John Carter and he says, I used to do sync a lot, but now I try and do it manually. But sync can be handy if you need to get it beat matched fast, providing you make sure it's done right. Sometimes it can be inaccurate, but I don't see the big issue about using sync. If you find it useful, then use it. It's good to know how to beat match manually, but again, I see nothing wrong with using sync either. Thanks for that, John. Let's move on to our next answer. This is from Chris Clouden. He says, I too used to use sync a lot until I got a feel for the controller and proper mixing. Consider it like training wheels. Now I can't even mix with it on as it throws off my mix. Also, in my humble opinion, sync does not work well for all genres of music. I find it's great for EDM, trap, and the like. For hip-hop, reggae, R&B, and such, nope. For me anyways. Thanks for that, Chris. Our next answer comes from Kat Denton, and she says, I like DJing for the same reason I like graphic design. Both rely heavily on having technical prowess as well as having creative and artistic skills. Left brain and right brain are both engaged in a satisfying process. If I were hiring a graphic designer and they said to me, I don't ever use the left, center, right align buttons in Photoshop because a true graphic designer should just eyeball it, I would have a hard time not rolling my eyes. But at the end of the day, truly what matters in both professions is a quality and product that makes people happy and wanting more. The toolbox and method the artist uses to create shouldn't determine its value. Thanks for that, Kat. Moving on, our next answer is from Adam Wallace, and he says, if you are using digital, use or not of the sync button is totally irrelevant. The important features to note are things like the beat grid and accurate BPM info, as that means you can use your eyes to do exactly what sync does. In other words, make the BPMs the same and line up the grids. The pure old school manual approach to this would be to use your ears, remembering, counting, and so on. So the first point I would make is to try to stop using sync at all. I used to use it all the time. Why not? Am I right? And then when I started specifically not using it, I found I was having more actual fun mixing. I had more things to do, the overall flow of activity felt better and more interesting. It also allows an audience to see things they are used to seeing. In other words, actually moving the tempo controls, nudging the platters, and so on. It generally looks better. Also, take it from me, it feels better too. Second point, I feel you should only upload stuff that is an accurate representation of what you do in reality. I've known people to make perfect mixes using things like Audacity for uploading, and honestly, what is the point of that? It's basically misrepresentation. Practice what you preach. Get it so you make your mixes as good as they can be, regardless of whether you use sync or not. Obviously, only upload things you are happy with, but I do not accept the proposition that sync equals less mistakes. Thank you for that, Adam. And for our final answer, this one is coming from DJam, and he says, here's a dirty little secret I learned long ago when many top DJs and labels were selling mix compilations in CD stores. Practically all those mixes were done on a DAW, or a digital audio workstation. They were not going into a studio with 2 decks and a mixer. They would pick a selection of music they have licensing for and piece them into a mix on a DAW. I'll also remember back in the day how many DJs would use multi-track recorders or cutting reel-to-reel tape to make perfect mixes for the radio. I'll admit I use sync to make my mixes, yet I'll also confess I often redo blends over and over even with the sync. I'm always intensely tweaking the sound in my blends, the timing of tunes coming in and out, the EQ manipulation, volumes, etc. I tend to look at recorded mixes as the impression you make on everyone. A mistake or foible will be heard over and over, while a mistake in a live gig will only be heard once. I still think it is important to know how to go manual for when sync fails you. However, this whole cheating debate is honestly tired and obsolete. Let me put the hard reality on you all. If you have a DJ who uses sync but can get 1,000 people out versus the manual beat matcher who can only get 100 people out, the syncer will see more bookings. Sorry to sound bleak, but that's the hard reality of this business. Focus on what will win you fans and notoriety. That's what will help you succeed. Talent can win you fans, but popularity is what wins you bookings. Look at the festivals who book headliners who play pre-recorded mixes. They are thinking in ROI, or returns on investment, not who plays manually and who doesn't. Only way that changes is if we see the patrons walk away, which they're not. Thanks for that, DJam. Right, so that's it for this episode of Your Feedback. Thank you to everyone who sent in their answers. I always check the Digital DJ Tips comment section as well as the Digital DJ Tips Facebook page for answers. So if you want to be featured in an upcoming episode of Your Feedback, just be active on those sources. Thank you once again. My name is Joey. I'll see you next time.